Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. The biggest weekend of the college football season is upon us. We have a ton of great matchups to break down for you today. Welcome into Saturday Cadence. My name is Blake Biscardi. I've got David Wertheim with me here. We have a jam-packed show on tap for you guys today, so get ready. Lots of big games like we talked about, but before we hop into that real quick, John Mateer, this is one of the leading stories of this week. That's going to shape the college football playoff race, the SEC race, and how the committee will evaluate the Sooners later in the season. John Mateer has a broken bone, I believe, in his hand, is going to miss at least a month is what is being anticipated right now. David, what are your thoughts there where you see this injury to John Mateer? Looks a little bit surprising. Apparently, he played with it last week, and maybe that was a factor in the game against Auburn. We don't know, but they still won the game. They escaped, and Oklahoma now is going to be without their signal caller and Heisman Trophy frontrunner here for about the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely shocking to me when I saw that. I kind of came out of nowhere to me. Oklahoma with a really nice start to their season, 4-0, a couple of wins over ranked teams, obviously beating Michigan and then Auburn. They kind of get a little bit of a bye week here this week playing Kent State. That's a game that they should win regardless of who's a quarterback. But after that, you got to go on the road to Texas. You got to go on the road to South Carolina. You host Ole Miss, and then you go to Tennessee. So pretty tricky slate coming up here for the Sooners, and having to do that without their star quarterback, a guy who many had kind of as an early Heisman candidate here, and certainly in the top five. And having to do that without him now certainly feels a little bit more daunting. They'll start Michael Hawkins, and we'll see how that goes here over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, definitely disappointing for Sooners fans who have really been waiting for a while to kind of be back in towards the top of college football. They had gotten there, 2 ranked wins early. So disappointing for sure. And you never really want to see a star quarterback go down like that. But the good news is, 4 weeks doesn't really kill you. They're going to have to find a way to spring an upset win or two in that time. But if you lose a game, you're still okay. Kent State this week should be no problem. So let's say Mateer misses 4 games. Kent State, they'll win regardless. So you're looking at 3 games. If you can get in that stretch, you got to feel okay still. So hopefully for Oklahoma and for Mateer, they're still in it by the time he gets back. And then the Sooners can kind of roll from there.
David, I mentioned this in the opener about how the selection committee will evaluate Oklahoma. I think you were alluding to it a little bit there. If they can find 2 wins, I mean, one, they have to win one of those 3 big conference games there. But if they can get 2 wins and get out of this stretch without him at 3-1, I do think that loss is going to be viewed a little bit differently. And there is a little bit of precedent that we've seen before with Jordan Travis and Florida State fans. I know I'm sorry for putting the bad taste back in your guys' mouths again, but they do change how they evaluate teams because they take in injuries to key players. So that is part of the criteria if it is close. So for Oklahoma fans, it's in your back pocket, not something you want to bank on. Obviously, you want to win the games, and doing so is only going to bode good things for you. But that is going to be a factor in December if Oklahoma is on the playoff bubble there at the end of the season. And they've got Red River coming up too, and anything can happen in those rivalry games. We've seen backup quarterbacks get inserted and come alive in that game before. So a storyline that would not be unfamiliar to that setting and scene. So another layer of intrigue there to this Texas-Oklahoma game. And while we're on the topic of injured quarterbacks, how healthy really is Arch Manning? So that's another thing to keep into consideration. I'm not alluding to him being out in that game, but his health certainly hasn't looked like he's been at 100%. It's documented that he's been wincing throwing the football. But we'll see as the weeks go on. David, listen to these games that we have this week. I mean, if this does not excite you, this is what college football is all about. The regular season means something. These games are going to define conference races, playoff races, and we're going to get a really good evaluation of who's legit and who's not. Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon. Those are the 2 headliner matchups. Penn State gets the whiteout. Georgia doing a blackout. They're at home, both night games. Ole Miss is hosting LSU. Washington, a purple rain game, so it's a purple out. They're hosting the #1 Ohio State Buckeyes. Julian Saints' first road test. We're going to get to that later in the show. Illinois got their pants pulled down last week. USC coming to town this week, who's had a really nice start to the season. And then Texas A&M and Auburn. So another key matchup here in the SEC, and one for A&M that could really insert themselves into the thick of the college football race if they're able to get a win on Saturday.
It's the time of year now where every week is a good week. You get into conference play, and there's going to be some marquee matchups every week, especially within the Big Ten and the SEC, with just how many teams and how many good teams are in both of those conferences. So yeah, I mean this is really exciting. We'll talk about all these games individually here, but certainly in the Big Ten and the SEC, especially a lot of big tests this week. You mentioned Ohio State going on the road to Washington, and obviously Georgia, Alabama is a highlight every year. Ole Miss should be a fascinating game there against LSU. So yeah, I definitely agree. Week of college football, and should be really exciting all the way through.
David, what's the biggest matchup this Saturday? Is it Georgia, Bama, or is it Penn State, Oregon?
I think it's Penn State, Oregon still. I think both of those teams are still viewed as bona fide national title contenders. I think some people still have questions about Alabama. I know I do. And I think ultimately this is another, Blake, you said it best a couple of weeks ago, where Georgia kind of wins the game because of the G on their helmet. And it feels like this is kind of one of those games this week also, going up against Alabama at home, where Georgia kind of wins it with the G on their helmet. And I think for Oklahoma, for Oregon, going on the road to Penn State. And this is a game really for James Franklin, and we've said it for so many years now. This is a game James Franklin needs to win. And he's got two chances this year. He's got this game. He's got Ohio State on November 1st. And he's got to win at least one of those. He's going to get everybody off his back. But we'll see. I mean, this is a Penn State team that was geared up for a big run, bringing everybody back. And, it'll be really interesting to see how they can pull things together this weekend at home against Oregon. And this is an Oregon team that kind of gashed Jim Knowles a little bit in their first matchup last year back in October in Eugene. Now, obviously, moving over to Happy Valley and with Penn State, it'll be interesting to see how much of that collapse last year was really on Jim Knowles. And then obviously Ohio State took care of them in the college football playoff. How much of that was on Jim Knowles versus how much of it was on the rumored Larry Johnson and Ryan Day adjustments that have not been confirmed or denied by anybody. So it'll be. I'm really excited for that Oregon and Penn State game. That's my game of the week, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes for both of those programs. They both need this one in different ways, so that one will be really fascinating.
David, I'm going to parlay this into the next segment, which is going to be the Oregon and the Penn State preview. Of those four teams we just talked about, Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon, which team is facing the most pressure? I know it kind of has to be Penn State, but I do think you can make an argument for Alabama, given what Kalen DeBoer is up against, especially with the loss to Michigan in the bowl game, the loss to Florida State to open the season, hey, these expectations are up here. Are you meeting them? Georgia, again, I don't think there's as much pressure on Georgia, but I do think there is some pressure on Oregon too, because Dan Lanning and Oregon have to find ways to win big games. And they did beat Ohio State last year, as you just said, but they've got to make that the rule, not the exception, because they were not able to get it done in the postseason, and they've not been able to get it done in the postseason that way. So this is another big step for Oregon in a team that is reloading. And maybe we thought that they were a year away this year, and I thought Oregon would be better towards the end of the season this year. They are off to a fast start, not something Dan Lanning's been able to do in the last couple of years. So really good to see for that program, because there's talent everywhere. But of those four teams, who is facing the most pressure?
I think it's Alabama still, and I think with Kalen DeBoer, someone on the hot seat still. I wouldn't say that they need this one. I mean, it's hard to go into Athens and win. Certainly in recent years with the dominance that Georgia's had. But I think it's still Alabama. I mean, they need to kind of reassert themselves if they want to do anything significant this season. And obviously with an early season loss, they don't want to get a second one here before we get to October. So I think that Alabama certainly feels the most pressure. And Penn State, obviously we've talked about James Franklin for all these years at this point. But like at the same time, I kind of feel with James Franklin, like, is he expected to win these games at this point? Like, is anyone really expecting him to win? Um, Not. So I don't know if there is pressure in that regard because I'm not expecting them to win. I haven't expected James Franklin to win a big game for a while. So as such, I think the answer is Alabama, um, followed by Penn State still, a little bit for Oregon, and then not as much for Georgia. Ultimately, I think the reason I'm saying that with Georgia is because I think they win this game. Um, but I would say certainly Alabama here with Kalen DeBoer. If they can win this game, that really makes a statement, and would mean a lot for that program. So I'm gonna say Alabama here.
Let's get into the Oregon and Penn State preview. And the first thing I have on the board is the if not now, then when for James Franklin and for Penn State. And David, you're saying you're not expecting James Franklin to win this game. So does that alleviate a little bit of the pressure for him? Yes. Vegas, though, has Penn State favored by 3.5. We'll get to that pick in the final segment of the show. So, yeah, I do think some people are expecting Penn State to win the game. I think if you historically look at the matchup, James Franklin doesn't win these games, so why should I expect him to win? I mean, my logic on this is I need to be proven wrong in order to pick Penn State, in order to believe. And in the summer, I was like, you know what? I think everything's going to align for Penn State to get the win. I don't think the game will feel that big at first because I think Oregon will be off to a slow start. Now that we have the data from the first month of the season, really, I feel a little bit differently about that. I see data and I see real world results from Oregon where I can say, you know what, that team is legit. And I do think they can go into Happy Valley and win the game. But if it's not now for Penn State, when is it, David? Because if they lose this game Saturday and the pressure that they feel going into it just from the outside and the national championship expectations, you imagine this game's at home. Imagine what it's going to feel like on November 1st walking into the Horseshoe in Columbus against potentially the number one ranked team in the country should Ohio State win all their games up until then. I mean, you think there's pressure now, then you go into Columbus and have more pressure there. I mean, when is going to be the time for Penn State where they can get over the hump? It feels like if it's not Saturday, I don't know when it would be.
I think that's fair. But maybe this is just who Penn State is. Maybe they're destined to be the seventh or eighth best team every year. And it just is what it is. I mean, that's what they've been for the better part of a decade at this point, is the seventh or eighth best team every year. And maybe that's just who they are. And that's not a bad spot to be in. I mean, maybe, you can win a playoff game, you can win two playoff games. And then if something goes right, maybe you sneak your way into the championship and who knows from there. It's not necessarily a bad spot to be in. Obviously, Penn State would expect, or they would want more. Um, but with just who they are and where they're located and the difficulty of their conference, I don't think that's necessarily a bad spot to be in if you're the third best team in the Big Ten every single year. Um, but yes, I do agree that if you want to be elite, if you want to be the best team in the Big Ten, then yes, you need to win on Saturday. And really, you need to win again on November 1st. I would say that winning both of those games is very unlikely, obviously. Um, but it's doable, and an elite team would win both of those games. But then again, we saw Ohio State last year losing to Oregon, losing to Michigan, and then going out and steamrolling their way in the playoff. Like if Penn State loses to Oregon, they're not dead. If they lose to Oregon and Ohio State, they're still not dead. They would need a lot more help, but they're not dead. And I think that's just the new landscape of college football: is you got to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. And if you can win if you can sneak another game in there, then you're in really good shape. So I think that's really where I'm at for Penn State, and James Franklin, is that maybe that this is just who they are as a program. They're the third best team in the Big Ten. They're the seventh or eighth best team in the country every year, and that's not a bad spot.
David, I'm going to push on your argument a little bit too and say, because we've talked about it, just like you said, Penn State can lose to Oregon and to Ohio State and still get in the playoff, and that's okay. And we've said that the 12-team format is tailor-made for Penn State for that exact reason. Like, okay, you don't have to win the biggest games on your schedule to get to the playoff in this format, but you got to find 10 wins if you don't have the marquee match or the
Yes.
marquee wins on the schedule. But David, if they're not winning the games during the regular season, what makes you think they're going to be able to do that in the playoff? Like and I know that's a little bit rhetorical, but for Penn State, it has to come somewhere. So if you have the game at home and you have all these dynamics on your side in this game. If you have the stars aligning, you get the whiteout, you get it at home at night. You have Oregon coming in town early in the season. I mean, every factor on paper, if you take records aside of the head coaches, says this is the time it happens for Penn State. I would just have a hard time believing that it would happen in the playoff instead of this spot here. And that just to me is where I'm like, if it's not Saturday, I don't know when it's going to be, because I would have to be proven wrong by them winning in order to believe it if it's not on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that point. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying. Like, if you're going to be an elite team, you win this game. If
Right.
you're going to be a good team, you don't necessarily win this game. So that's kind of where I'm at with Penn State. Yes, if they're going to be an elite team, and if they're going to be a serious national title contender, it starts on Saturday with a win over Oregon and the whiteout at night. Bottom line, for sure, you're right about that. Um, and then we'll just learn. We'll learn on Saturday if Penn State's going to be an elite team or if they're just going to be a good team yet again. Last year they beat Boise in the playoff, like whatever. Um, and that's good. And anytime you can get a playoff, I mean, there's only there's 5 or 6 teams that had a playoff win last year. I mean, it's not, guaranteed that you're going to get one. So getting one is a big deal, but at the same time, you can't expect to beat Boise State every year. So I think, yeah, if you're going to be an elite team, it starts on Saturday with a win over Oregon.
Yeah, and even in the playoff last year, Penn State got SMU and they got Boise. So yeah, they may not have been the world beater teams that you're like, oh yeah, we beat them. But you know what Penn State got? A playoff win. Then they got a second one. Then they got a taste of a national semifinal. They couldn't complete a pass to a wide receiver in the game, but they got a taste of a national semifinal. They know at least what the stage is like. So that's something that they can maybe hang their hat on or build on heading into this season. And one of the things from last year's team, David, I just mentioned it, completing forward passes to wide receivers. They were unable to do that against Notre Dame in the semifinal. And we haven't really seen them do that much this year. And I think the game on Saturday hinges on Drew Aller's ability to stretch the field vertically. And I sound like a broken record because I say it in every big game that Penn State's in. James Franklin was a wide receiver coach. I don't understand how they do not have at least one great, if not elite receiver every single year, but they've not had that. And I don't doubt Penn State's ability to run the football. They ran for 297 yards in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon last year. I don't have doubts that Singleton and Allen are going to be able to move the ball, and Drew Aller's going to get some with his legs, and that offensive line is going to play well. I do have doubts about Penn State stretching the field vertically. That's where I think the game hinges on Saturday. I think they are pretty even. I give the mental edge to Oregon, but I think it really is going to be in Drew Aller's hands. Is that the right read to you on Saturday?
Yeah, in college football, you can only go as far as your quarterback goes. It's rare that you can win in spite of your quarterback. It happens, but it's rare. And I think Drew Aller, we've been talking about this guy for 4 years now. And it's always been the same conversation. Like, when is he going to make that leap to being an elite starter? And if he can be an elite starter, then Penn State's an elite team. And it's kind of similar to Clemson with Cade Klubnik. Like, they needed those guys to take another step this year. Obviously, Clemson is a total dumpster fire, and Penn State isn't anywhere close to that. But it's similar in that you need your quarterback to take a leap if you want to be a serious title contender. And I don't know that we've seen that leap with Aller. They struggled to throw it against FIU. So that doesn't exactly give me a ton of confidence for their game against Oregon. Um, so yes, I agree. A lot of the game will hinge on Drew Aller. I think Oregon's going to take a page out of Ohio State's book and try and stop the run. That's how Ohio State has been able to beat Penn State all these years, is that they're able to stop the run, make the quarterback try and beat you. And more often than not, they're not able to do that. And I think Oregon's going to have a similar plan this week against Penn State. And Drew Aller's going to have to find a way to beat it. Put up or shut up. I mean, this guy's been there forever. He's the Perry Ellis of Penn State football. He has been there forever. He's been the starter forever. And at some point, something's got to give. And kind of like what you were saying earlier, if that doesn't happen Saturday, I don't know when it will.
Yeah, because the secondary is only going to get better when you walk into Columbus. And then you get to the playoff and you may have to face Texas's secondary. You don't know. I mean, there's some really good defenses out there. I don't think you're going to find one better in the Big Ten that Penn State's going to have to play outside of their own and Ohio State. And I think Oregon's up there, although Oregon's strengths are more on the front seven from my knowledge. But David, what's Oregon's way to win this game? We know Penn State's it's going to revolve around Drew Aller. How do you think Dante Moore is going to fare in the whiteout environment? And where do you see the Ducks trying to find success early in the game to get in a rhythm and start moving the football?
Well, I used to say that Dan Lanning seemed to always have his guys prepared, and then I watched that Rose Bowl against Ohio State where they were basically dead within the first 5 minutes of the game. So I can't really use that argument anymore. But I do think they'll be prepared for this one. They're used to loud nighttime games, most of them at home, but they're used to it. They're used to the noise. It'll be interesting to see how Dante Moore fares on the road here. Huge road test with a raucous crowd. It'll be loud. It always is. Um, but Penn State, Oregon rather, I mean, it's the same blueprint that you give to any kind of big road test, and that is don't turn the ball over, try and start fast, or at least get a stop on your first defensive possession. You don't have to score necessarily on your first drive, but you need to get a stop and kind of set the tone. I mean, last year, look, I mean, the game that I referring to, Ohio State, Penn State last year, on the road, Penn State starts off the game with a pick six. They get another score. They're up 10-0 in the first 3 minutes of the game, 5 minutes of the game, and Ohio State ended up winning that one. And so for Oregon, really, if they can avoid that, you've got to feel pretty good. I'm not sure that this Penn State team is all that much better than last year's Penn State team. So if you can avoid doing what Ohio State did, and obviously Ohio State was able to come back and win that game, but if you can avoid that poor start, getting the crowd really riled up, don't turn the ball over, I think you've got a shot. And if you can keep it, within striking distance in the fourth quarter, or take a lead into the fourth quarter somehow, you've got to be feeling good. And I think that's entirely within the realm of possibilities. This game is a 3.5-point spread. You factor in Penn State getting 3 for being at home. They view these two teams as even. And I think that's totally fair. So for Oregon, it's just, don't do anything stupid right off the bat. You don't even have to start off fast. Just don't start slow. And I think you've got a shot.
It's a learning Saturday for sure. And one thing Ohio State had to overcome last year in this environment was that early pick from Will Howard. Penn State went down the field. Ohio State held to a field goal, got the ball back, and it was third down. And boom, Penn State gets a pick six, and it is 10-0. And you're like, oh my gosh, like the stadium's going to come alive. Now, Will Howard's a veteran quarterback, and Ohio State had a ton of veteran guys on that offense. So they were able to weather the storm, come back, win the game, and they controlled it from that point forward. If Oregon is not able to do that, if they get caught in a situation like that, I do agree that they could get in trouble. So I think for Oregon, it is weathering the storm and sticking to your script of your offense, not turning the football over, and just playing your game and controlling your game. Keep the pressure on Penn State because historically, they don't do anything with it. So it's going to be that game where we learn about both teams because we don't know a ton about them. And two more teams we're going to learn about, David, is Alabama and Georgia. So let's slide into this preview here. Bama goes down to Florida State early in the season, week 1. They've quietly been playing really good football. Ty Simpson's looked really sharp the last couple of weeks. But so is this game a must-win for Kalen DeBoer and Bama? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier. Like if they lose this game, I think we may see some fires in Tuscaloosa. If he wins this game, I mean, the range of outcomes, win or lose for Alabama, is about as wide as you can get in my judgment from the fan base when we look at Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's hard to beat Georgia at any time, especially on the road. And I think for Alabama, with all that they've been through with Kalen DeBoer, I don't necessarily think they have to win, but you can't get blown out. You got to be competitive. You got to be competitive down to the last play, and put on a good performance. At least give your fans some hope that hey, yeah, we didn't have enough to beat Georgia on the road today, but we tried hard and, we were in it till the end, and that would be okay. They would have 2 losses before the end of September. I think that's the bigger problem in that scenario, is that they'd have 2 losses before the end of September. But, if you lose to Georgia on the road in a close game, it's not the worst thing in the world. You can't get blown out. I don't really take much stock in their win over Wisconsin. Wisconsin is horrible. So they did what they were supposed to do there, which is good. I mean, they didn't let up, and there wasn't any time in that game where you felt they were in danger, which is good and what they're supposed to do against a team like Wisconsin. But I'm not exactly moving the needle on that. And ultimately, like I said, if they can hang in there against Georgia, compete, play their game, strong four quarters, maybe you win, maybe you don't. But that's what they need. That's what they need on Saturday.
One other thing, David, too, with this matchup, I know we've been talking about Penn State a lot and how James Franklin is 4-20 against AP top 10 teams, and those struggles are well documented. Another struggle that's well documented and that people are not acknowledging is Georgia has an issue beating Alabama. Like they struggle to do that. And I think
And they
that
have an
that is
issue
all.
beating Nick Saban. I mean, so did everybody else. Um, I'm not exactly. That's another one that I'm not really buying. I mean, Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time, and everybody's struggled to beat him. And I didn't mean to interrupt there, but I've heard that trope so many times, and obviously Nick Saban wasn't there last year, but ultimately I think that's kind of overblown until you get a few more games of Kalen DeBoer versus Kirby Smart under his belt.
Okay, so you would take that claim as you're not putting a lot of stock in that in comparison to the James Franklin one at Penn State, even though DeBoer won the game last year. And last year was a classic, but also last year Alabama almost blew it. I mean, it was fireworks in the last couple minutes of that game. They got out to what was it, a 35-point lead, and all this you're like, what is happening? And then Georgia comes all the way
Yeah,
back, and you repeat, what is happening? And Ryan Williams spins free, scores a touchdown. The place goes bananas. They basically walk it off. I mean, it was go watch the highlights of it from last year if you want to get ready for it, because I think we're going to see another classic. It may not have the fireworks and the drama of last year's matchup, but I do think it's going to be really, really good on Saturday night there in Sanford Stadium in front of a blackout crowd.
yeah, totally agree. And yes, I'm not putting a ton of stock into it. Georgia played a bad half last year for sure. They almost came back and won that game. Um, if Alabama wins on Saturday, maybe you can start to have that discussion. But I mean, everybody struggled with Nick Saban. It just is what it is. So I'm not putting too much stock into that just yet.
David, let's move into another game here out of the Big Ten. Ohio State, number one ranked team in the country, going on the road to play Washington. The last time in, I think, 25 years, the number one team in the country was going on the road, favored by single digits, was Notre Dame playing USC. I believe that game was in 2012. Notre Dame did win the game and cover. The Buckeyes, though, the spread dropped all the way down to 7.5. That has since moved since we've made the show notes here. And I have it on the board at 8.5. That's going to move to 7.5 now. Julian Saint's first road start. What is your feel going into this game? When I looked at Ohio State's schedule, the big game juices are going to come with Texas, Penn State, and Michigan. I looked down the schedule, wasn't really concerned with Illinois. I do have the pause about Washington because of that, just that. Julian Saint on the road. Ohio State has to execute in the red zone. They weren't able to do that last time we saw them play. So I think that's an area for me that I watch in this game. I do think Washington is better than they get credit for, too. I think that's another thing. People see Washington as an unranked team. I think Washington should be ranked. And I'm not saying that just because they're playing Ohio State. I do think that Washington is one of the 25 best teams in the country. I don't know how good that they are, but through 4 weeks, I think that they're one of the 25 best, especially their quarterback, Damon Williams Jr. He's an X factor. But what do you read into this Ohio State game against Washington? It's going to be noon local kick, but Saints first road start.
Yeah, the line moving is certainly kind of strange. I don't really know what to read into that. I don't think I'm going to read a lot into that. I think a lot of people looked at how Ohio State played last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, against OU, and maybe have some reservations after that game. But they really dominated it, honestly, and just didn't punch the ball in the red zone in the first half, and that made the score a lot closer than it should have been. Also, a miracle touchdown catch from OU for their only touchdown of the game made that one a little bit closer as well. Ultimately, I think Ohio State wins this one. I think they're just more talented than Washington. The road environment definitely is a problem. And a lot of it will be tasked on the Ohio State defense. I think this is a game that Ohio State can win with their defense. I'm not saying they will, but they can. And if Matt Patricia does what we expect him to do, I think Ohio State wins, and I think they win relatively comfortably. Similarly to the Oregon Penn State game, if Ohio State has some early turnovers or struggles to get stops early, I think they might be in some trouble. But if they can kind of hold their ground there for the first quarter or so, ultimately this could be a pretty comfortable win for them. So I think this is a game where if Ohio State loses, it means Washington's really good. And it also means that Ohio State beat themselves in some capacity. So I'm interested to see how it goes. The Buckeyes are still more talented than Washington. The Washington defense has struggled. They haven't really played anybody yet. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in their first test against a real opponent. But ultimately, I think the Buckeyes get this one done.
David, you mentioned Ohio State could win this game with its defense, and we do have some evidence from that from the Texas game. That's how Ohio State won that game. There were some key drops by wide receivers that could have widened the scoreboard a little bit more for the Buckeyes, but I do think that they could win the game with the defense as well. And I think if the defense can force a turnover early in the game from Demond Williams Jr., I think that's where you can really settle that in, and the defense can really cut its teeth and pin its ears back to go at Demond Williams in that offense, because he's a dynamic playmaker with his legs. They've got good receivers. They're going to want to run the football as well. The crowd noise in Husky Stadium is one of the more underrated venues in the country. It's pretty well documented too that it's a tough place to play, but going and experiencing it there, like I've been to a whiteout, and that is nuts. I've not been to Husky Stadium, but from what I've heard from people who have gone, and I know some people going on Saturday, it's loud in there. And that is going to be a factor, I think, for the Buckeyes. And when I look at the keys of the game for them, especially for Sayin, you just got to operate the offense, don't turn the football over, and execute in the red zone. All the things that you said, I think you hit the nail right on the head. The Buckeyes just have to execute. And if they execute, they have more talent. They have a great defense. There's not a big hole on the roster where, like, oh, if this gets exposed, sure, Ohio State can find itself in a game that's one possession, or they could get into a shootout, maybe. But I don't think Ohio State just straight up loses to Washington because Washington is better. I agree with you that if Ohio State loses, it would be because, A, Washington is good, but also some form or fashion, Ohio State's going to be like -2 in the turnover battle, or maybe settle for 3 field goals instead of touchdowns. It'll be something like that where the Buckeyes beat themselves. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, I mean that's just how it is in this type of game on the road. And I think Ryan Day off a bye week, people forget his stellar record after a bye week. I think they've been planning for this one for a while, and ultimately I think Ohio State wins, but it could be close, and I could be wrong here. And there's certainly a lot of smoke about Washington, and I think it's warranted. I think they're a good team, but I just don't think they have enough to beat the Buckeyes on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, an upset or a close game would not surprise me. It's just not what I expect. Again, Ryan Day has earned the trust in this spot too, especially being off a bye week. This is not a game that Ryan Day's team is going to go out and be unprepared. So I am very curious to see how it's going to go and what the script is going to look like. Brian Hartline's first time play calling a game on the road like this with a freshman quarterback. So lots of things to evaluate and to learn about Ohio State too, just as much as Washington, and if they can pull the upset. But David, two teams before we get into the picks that I think are on upset alert. I think Florida State at Virginia, that's Friday night, and then Indiana at Iowa. I think both of those teams could be on upset alert during the course of this weekend. Do you agree with those thoughts?
I think Indiana rolls. I really like what they've been doing. I think Iowa's pretty bad. Obviously, we've seen the Kinnick magic before, um, but I feel pretty good about Indiana here. They just boat raced Illinois, and I don't think Iowa's very good. So I give me the Hoosiers there. Um, and ultimately, I think for Indiana, it's just one of those games where like and it's kind of what we've been saying. Like if you're a good team, you win this game. And I think they are a good team. I think they win this game.
Yeah, what I was looking at for this is Indiana coming off that big win and then going to Kinnick. We've seen that script before with other teams, notably Ohio State, where it's an emotional letdown and you find yourself in an ugly game and the Kinnick magic just works itself. So that was my thought there, where they're on upset alert. And then Florida State at Virginia, I think, is more real for the upset, especially being on a Friday night. Miami's coming to town next week. All the hype is going into that matchup there. It's a rivalry game. Florida State coming off a bye week. Virginia has been an Achilles heel to the program historically, not so much recently. I just see that as a schedule dynamic spot where you're like, don't love that. Just kind of escape with a win. It's a tight spread too. It's at 6.5. So that's my thought there. And let's move into the Saturday 7 pick segment. And starting with that game, Florida State is favored by only 6.5 points on the road Friday night at Virginia. David, do you think that the Cavaliers can either win the game outright or cover, or are you confident that Mike Norvell's bunch is going to be ready to go Friday night and then they'll roll?
I think Florida State rolls. I don't think Virginia's very good. And I think in college football now, I think you're just going to see less and less upsets. Like, for example, USF beating Florida. That's a huge upset. But is it really like Florida isn't very good? Like, is it really a huge upset? So I don't know. I just think just now with the dynamic, I think there's even a bigger disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And I think Virginia is a very big have-not. But I think Florida State wins comfortably.
Yeah, no, it's a good argument for sure. And Florida State's playing talented. I'm going to use your logic on this. I do think this is a trap game spot for the Seminoles. But if you're a good team, you win the game. And I think Florida State is a good team. So I'll pick Florida State to win the game because it's at 6.5. If it was at 7, I may feel a little bit differently. USC favored by 6.5 at Illinois. That's the big noon kickoff game this week. Do the Trojans continue their hot start to the season, or is this a game that Illinois desperately needs at home and they're able to right the ship with a big marquee win?
Well, Illinois has made their mark the last couple of years with their defense and didn't look good last week. I got the Trojans here. I think ultimately Illinois takes a big step back in the Dave rankings after that last week. I mean, they weren't competitive at all. They gave up six. They lost by 60 points or whatever it was. So give me the Trojans.
I like USC as well. I wasn't big on Illinois to start the season, and I need to see something from Illinois before I can believe in them and pick them. They have big matchups on the schedule. I'm just not in a place to pick them right now. And I think USC actually looks pretty good. So I've been surprised and pleased with what I've seen from Lincoln Riley's group. So I will take USC to win, and I'll take USC to cover as well. Next game is going to be Ohio State minus 7.5 now at Washington. David, what's your thoughts?
This is a really tough one for me. I want to say that Washington will keep it close. That's what everyone's saying, but for some reason, I just don't feel that way. I've got the Buckeyes here, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I've gotten a good read on this Ohio State team, and I think ultimately they pull it out, they get the cover. I think Washington hangs in there for a while. I mean, they're a good team for sure. Don't get me wrong, but they've gotten a lot of hype here, and I don't really know why. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes.
I think this game is close for 3 quarters, and I think it's uncomfortable, but it's one that defines your character for Ohio State, and the mettle of this team is tested. But this is a championship caliber program, and I think they can win the game by at least 10. So I'll take the Buckeyes as well. LSU at Ole Miss. David, the line in this game has moved a little bit more than the Ohio State Washington line. LSU opened as the favorite. All of a sudden, Ole Miss is now favored by 1.5. So, yeah, it's in that pick'em territory, but it's still flipped. It's cross zero. So, Ole Miss favored by 1.5 at home here. Is the lane train able to roll, or do you think Garrett Nussmeier and LSU get the marquee win, even though it would be their third, in quotes, marquee win of the season if we looked at the preseason polls? But first, big real test for LSU now that we know the caliber of team that they're facing on their schedule.
Yeah, I mean those wins over Florida and Clemson look less impressive every week. I was going to take Ole Miss regardless of where the line was here. I think this is one of those kind of Lane Kiffin games where he gets kind of pissed off and then they ultimately win. I'm going to take Ole Miss here. Trinidad Chambliss starting again, third straight start for him over Austin Simmons. I like what he's been doing. I like what Ole Miss has been doing. Give me the Rebels.
I was with you. I liked Ole Miss with whether or not LSU was favored. So I'm going to take Ole Miss to win and cover too, especially at 1.5. You may as well just take the Rebels here. So I got to win in the cover for the lane train. Auburn at Texas A&M. Aggies favored by 6.5 at home. Marcel Reed. This is a big spot for Mike Elko's team to continue to stay into the thick of the SEC and the college football playoff race.
I like A&M here. Auburn is good, but I don't think they're as good as A&M. And I think on the road, ultimately, they don't have enough. So Give me A&M here. I'm pretty confident in that one, which means that Auburn will probably win, but I'm going to take the Aggies.
Yeah, this is what's really interesting for me. This game is in College Station. And what I don't like, and this is where you get into that interesting territory, I've picked all the favorites so far, and I don't love that. I do like Texas A&M in the game, so I will take them to win. I will take Auburn to cover, though. Oregon, Penn State, Nittany Lions favored by 3.5. Who do you like in this one?
I got Oregon. I'm going to take Oregon here, and it's what I was said a lot about Ryan Day last year. Until he wins one, he's not going to win one. And I feel the same about James Franklin right now. Give me the Ducks here. I'm not sold on Drew Aller. I'm not necessarily sold on Dante Moore either, but I think ultimately Dan Lanning has his guys prepared and they're able to win this game somehow.
Penn State is 12-6 historically in these whiteout games. Now, they've not faced an opponent like Oregon in the last 6 tries. So I am going to take Oregon in this game. I liked Penn State in the preseason. I liked them early in the season. I have changed my mind to Oregon. I will take the Ducks plus 3.5 in this matchup. Dan Lanning gets a big win, though I would not be surprised if Penn State does it. But again, we got to see it to believe it. Final game on the board here is Alabama at Georgia. The Dogs favored by 3.5. David, final pick of the weekend to wrap around this incredible, incredible slate. Who do you have? Dogs are tied.
Give me the Dogs. This is a G helmet game, like you say. I've got Georgia in this one, similar to that Tennessee game. I think that it's a good one, and Georgia just ultimately does what they do, and they pull it out at the end. I really like what Alabama's been doing with Ty Simpson. Like I said, that win over Wisconsin doesn't really mean a lot to me, but ultimately, I think that Georgia gets it done with the G.
I was going to say that I'm going to stand in the bushes and make this pick, but I'm going to puff my chest out a little bit and do this. I'm taking Bama. I think Alabama's going to go into Sanford Stadium and win the game. This is not going to be a popular pick, and I'm not very comfortable doing it. Just like I wasn't comfortable picking Utah to lose at home last week, that paid off for me. I picked Tennessee to beat Georgia. They should have. They did not. This is no disrespect to Kirby Smart. I just think Alabama needs the game, and I think their offense goes in there. I see some holes on the Georgia defense. Tennessee put up 41 points. I'm going to take Alabama in an upset in Sanford Stadium on Saturday night.
It'd be shocking. I mean, really, it would be. With all the adversity Kalen DeBoer has faced, um, you're right. They do need it, but I think Georgia needs it too. Like you said, they can't beat Alabama, which I'm not really buying. They couldn't beat Nick Saban. Whoop-de-doo. But I think they're angry about how last year ended up playing a really bad half, then playing a really good half, but not being able to get it done with that crazy Ryan Williams play. I think Georgia's going to come in pissed off and get it done.
I think Georgia is as well. I just think so is Alabama. And I'm going to take Kalen DeBoer's creativity on offense. Him and Ryan Grubb have to cook up something here with Ryan Williams and Ty Simpson. Also, Jam Miller's back in the game. I don't know how big of a factor that's going to be, but Alabama's at least going to get some support in the ground game with him. They've got to protect Ty Simpson. If they can do that and he can throw the football, I think that's the pathway for the Tide to win the game. I'm banking on that happening. So I'm going to take Alabama and I'm going to roll with them, and I'm going to see how that pays off for us as we watch these games on Saturday. I think we're going to have really, really good football on all weekend. And just winding down the show here, David, final thoughts for us before these games kick off.
No, like I said, it's that first week where we get real conference play here, and should be exciting all the way through. Like I said earlier in the show, and we'll start it off with. I mean, it's just a crazy weekend from noon till 11. We're gonna have great games, so it's gonna be really exciting. I'm pumped for it, and it'll be a fun way to kind of kick off the. I don't want to say it's not the second half of the year, but it's conference play. It's exciting.
Yeah. If you are near a stadium to get to one of these games, go. If you're not, you have reservations for the couch. We'll write you a note. You can get out of all activities. So this is a really, really good weekend of college football, as good as it gets in the regular season outside of rivalry week. Last year it was that October 12th slate. This year it's September 27th. Guys, enjoy this weekend of college football. We've got you covered on socials at Saturday Cadence, at T Silver Bulletin. Make sure that you are tuned in, wall-to-wall coverage. noon to midnight. We've got you guys this week. Lots of great games. We appreciate you guys listening to today's show. Again, stay tuned to the socials. Pay attention for our next episode as we react to everything that we see this weekend. Enjoy all of the games, and we will see you on the Monday show. God bless.